What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Ride and Dad channel video, or welcome if it's your first time. Either way, very glad to have you. We're doing something that is probably for a lot of you guys archaic. A lot of you guys probably have never even heard of this as an option on bikes. But let's roll the intro and we'll kick it back old school.
Riding down a YouTube channel, it's the riding down a YouTube channel, it's the riding down a YouTube channel, it's the riding down a
All right, so this bike, if you guys don't know, if you've been living under a rock and you have no idea what the Ride and Dad is doing on his YouTube channel, this is a 2013 Sportster, obviously a Harley Davidson. But this bike and a lot of bikes have a throttle that is actuated by cables instead of by wire, an electronic throttle. So a lot of you guys have probably heard the term. Most of you guys probably think that I'm an idiot explaining this stuff, but I'm sure there are a few people that are going to watch this video that either just bought a bike or have no idea or whatever. So we're going to go through it either way. Throttle by wire is basically when your throttle fits on, it almost has like kind of gears, looks like a kind of clock gears. Your throttle tube fits over a plastic insert that's sitting inside of your bars, and all your throttle does is turn that little tube, and that tube has wires that go through your bars to your bike, and it tells a computer to go ahead and electronically open the throttle. The throttle is this, which we're going to zoom in later on, but basically the throttle is how much air and not coincidentally, what's the word I'm looking for? How much air and I don't know the word I'm looking for, but basically how much air, and then because of the air, fuel is getting pushed in or sucked into your bike, your cylinders. So this bike is not that. The reason they call that throttle by wire is because you're throttling via wires that go to electric, or that send an electrical signal to your bike. This is throttled by cable because there's two cables. One that is responsible for when you turn the throttle, the one cable of that is pushing, or pulling, I guess I should say, pulling the actual intake open. And then the other cable is responsible for making sure that it closes in case there's a failure or something like that, and also takes up the slack. So basically this video is going to show you guys how to adjust that. Now this is assuming that you have everything installed. This is not a how to install the cables video or anything like that. They are fairly self-explanatory. You just want to make sure you don't mix up the front and the back, with where they are. But as far as which one goes where, it's actually, no, yeah, you could screw it up. You could screw it up down at the throttle, at the intake area. But basically these are pressure fitted. They basically just push in and push out. I do have a video, if I remember while editing, which I should because I listened to the video. I'll link it here to do the install on the actual wires, because I showed that on a past bike. But this is assuming that you have everything installed. They're either brand new or you're going to reset it. If you want to reset like to factory spec kind of things, or if you're having issues with it, there's a lot of people that these are not installed correctly, and if they're not, adjusted correctly. And if they're not adjusted correctly, you actually have the possibility of not having as much power as your bike is actually capable of. So this might actually gain you some power also. I'll zoom you guys in closer and we'll start working on it. All right, so here we are at the throttle. It is important before you start this process, your cables are going to have, well, first you got to remove these boots. I should lead with that. Each cable should have this little rubber boot that should be over the adjustment area. Remove those, get those out of the way. You're going to have a adjustment. I don't know, this is not really a nut, but whatever this is, there's an adjustment piece that's going to freely be able to extend and contract just like on a clutch cable. On both of these, make sure that is all the way in and that your locking nuts are all the way backed out as well. You want to start with these in the shortest configuration as possible. You're going to need to find out which cable is responsible for opening your throttle. So an easy way to figure that out, if you wind up rotating your throttle, these go into I guess I'm having a stroke this morning. I can't think of anything. These fit into this at, coinciding sides. So when you're rotating it this way, this cable is being pulled here because it sits about right here. So every time I'm rotating it, this front cable is being pulled back, which means that's the one responsible for opening it. So you're just going to have to trace that all the way back if you want to make sure that you don't screw it up. In this bike, and I believe most bikes probably, it's the one on the back. So if you're looking at the intake, it's the one on the back. Also, I did forget to mention when I was kind of talking to you guys in front of the camera, make sure that you have your air cleaner off. Whether it's just a filter or whatever, most you should be able to take just the filter off unless you have one of those like 90-degree angle ones or like the elbows from Screamin' Chicken. But basically, you're going to need to see the intake and actually watch it open and close. All right, so I did my best to kind of get both this part and this part in picture. I know this is not ideal for either or, but you guys do need to see both at the same time, and I don't have two cameras. So if you'll look in here, this is where your intake actually is. This is your throttle body. Basically, every time you turn the grip or your throttle, whether it's cable or electronic throttle by wire, this opens. This is how the air gets sucked in. This is what allows your engine to rev higher. So what we need to do is adjust that cable that's responsible for, in our case, and most cases, it's probably going to be the front one because that's how you're gripping the throttle. You're just going to adjust the larger, again, for lack of a better term, the larger nut or whatever style thing this is. Just keep backing it out a little bit. We're going to start a little bit at increments, and you'll see that the more you do it, the more you'll be able to see that intake open. Now this intake, you'll hear it when I close it. Listen up. That intake is going to have that exact same sound when it's open all the way too. So the goal of this adjustment process for this cable is to make sure that without putting extra pressure on it, that when your throttle is open all the way, see, like, look, this is now my throttle is, my grip is turned all the way, but I still have this much of space, and you can hear that click too. The goal of this process is going to be able to open that all the way, but not have this cable so tight that your throttle, that your grip up here is just able to turn another, quarter turn or whatever, that you're like just stressing the hell out of not only your mechanism over here, but more importantly, your cable that's going to snap before this thing snaps. So you're just going to adjust it in little increments until you see that you have it all the way open. See, I'm still not getting that click, which means still got to back this screw out. You're basically, every time you back, or not screw, nut, every time you back this adjustment nut piece out, you're extending the length of the housing of the cable, and it's putting more pressure here. So let's check that again. I'm getting closer. It's pretty close. Nope, not yet. Almost there. Ooh, I think we're about another half a turn away, maybe. Oh yeah. I think that's it. Another way to test it is to hold your, hold this open at its full when your throttle is open, and release your throttle slowly to see if you have any more after that. And for us, we're right at the sweet spot. We're not getting any more tension here. And I think that's going to do it for this. So once you've adjusted that, you're going to have to come back up here, and this small nut, push it all the way, screw it all the way forward to where it's meeting up with that. At this point, you're going to need to go ahead and, where's my tools? They're on the seat. You're going to need to take the 2 wrenches. In this case, this is 3/8. I don't have 2 3/8, so I'm using this locking tool also. So you're just going to lock, you're going to snug the small nut, the locking nut, up against this other piece. That way it ensures your cable does not come loose or adjust in any different way. And then once we're done with that, we're going to check it one more time, just make sure nothing moved, make sure we're not losing any available power here. All right, now it's time to adjust the second cable, which is called the idle cable. Just a little kind of terminology. The front, even though they're both throttle and intake related, the front cable is a throttle cable and this cable is an idle cable. Now this cable is responsible for just in case something happens down here or whatever. Not only is this responsible for making sure that you can close the intake, the throttle body, if you need to, if something is wrong with your mechanism down there, but it's also responsible for tightening up the slack and making this kind of a better adjustment piece. So what you want to do here, start with it backed out. See now in the throttle, actually I should back you guys up, or at least let me just turn you up a little bit. So for this, we have a lot of play here. We're going to start by seeing, and this is not going to be as much of an adjustment usually. You'll know when you're adjusted too far. You'll either not have play, or when you return it, here, let me adjust it too far so you can see what that looks like. So this is going to be way too far. This is going to be putting pressure on the whole unit, the whole mechanism at the time. Look at how slow, it doesn't even want to go back. Look at that. Because it's just too tight. So the goal of this is to basically just take up the slack and then make sure that there's no slack at the cables down. Or a tiny bit of slack. You want to have it a little bit give, but you don't want to have it just a crazy amount of slack or a crazy amount of pressure down at the actual intake, the throttle body housing. Make sure that it's still also, just in case, this screw should be backed out, or at least backed out, this little kind of thumb screw. This should be backed out at least to the point where it's not affecting your throttle, just so you don't get any kind of false results, based on this. So still have a decent amount of slack, or play rather. Just tighten up a little bit, make sure the actuation's still good. It's still a decent amount of play. Almost no play anymore. That's pretty good. You do want a little, not a little bit of play necessarily, but you don't want it to be completely stocked up. That means there's going to be pressure pulling on this cable constantly, and that's going to cause premature cable failure. So I'm just going to double, triple, quadruple check here. And when I say play, I mean forward to backward rotation, not side to side. You should always have a little bit of side to side, and this goes on throttle by wire or throttle by cable. If you don't have side to side play, that means this is too close to the end of the bar and it's going to be all screwy. So I think we're at the sweet spot now. I'm going to check these cables down here. There's a tiny bit of free play, nothing crazy, but when I go ahead and pull it, it closes it. Check both sides. Think we're good. All right, time to set that locking nut up. Grab the tools, which I have already lost, even though, of course, they're all the way over here. Why would I put them someplace where it's easier for me to get? And if you do mar up, a little bit of, like in our case, we have nice fancy stainless steel, lines, or braided stainless steel. But, if you mar this up, these boots are going to be covering it. So it doesn't even matter if they don't look amazing. Now, obviously, you don't want to jack it all up on purpose. But if you do leave a little bit of a mark because of a locking tool or something like this, no one's ever going to see it. All right, make sure that's tight. Not a crazy tightness, just a moderate tightness. And then the last step would basically be to put these boots back on. Now, these boots are a pain in the butt. If you do have kind of Vaseline or something, if you put a very, very, very small amount on it, it usually does help. I try to stay away from stuff like that and just rotate a little bit, just because it's just one more thing to make a mess and whatever, and it's just not necessarily needed. But for whatever reason, if yours are really old and they're just having a really tough time, that is an option. Just make sure that they're not over-rotated. Sure that they're covering up. And then this is job done. All right, so at the end of that, you just want to after everything is completely done, and assuming that your tank, I'm doing other stuff. That's why my tank is, you know, still up and this is all exposed. But at the end of everything, you know, just make sure that no wires are being pinched anywhere. Everything's routed correctly, even though I guess really you wouldn't have to worry about being routed correctly or pinched because you wouldn't have just installed new cables like I did. So basically just make sure that your throttle feels nice and smooth. There's nothing rubbing on it. You know, you have a little bit of play, but nothing crazy. And you're able to use both cables to actuate it, you know, kind of good. There's people that say these cables will stretch over time. Now, while that is true, they're barely going to stretch. Don't over tighten these thinking that they're going to stretch up or whatever. They're just barely going to stretch, if that. It's all metal interior. It's not like it's a nylon cable or even like a guitar string or anything like that. They're barely going to stretch. You're also not putting that much pressure on them. It's not like you're like stretching the heck out of them and pulling them. So don't worry about that. But yeah, it's pretty simple. Hopefully that helped you guys either educate you if you have no idea what a throttle by cable setup looks like or is. And hopefully, I'm sure at least one person out there that watches this video is going to get some extra horsepower out of their bike. Well, technically not horsepower, but extra power out of their bike because their cables were set up incorrectly. Some dealerships screw up with these. There's a lot of people that, especially not as much Harley Davidson dealers, but like third-party dealers, if you buy a used bike and they had to either replace them or, you know, fix them or whatever like that. There's a lot of people that don't know how to properly set up these cables. So you're either going to get them too hard to where the throttle, I don't know if you guys have ever, guys that have been around bikes a long time probably have felt these, some cable actuated throttles that just feel like gritty and rough and like just an awful feeling. That's partially, I mean, it could be a bad cable or whatever. That's partially probably due to the fact that the cables are not adjusted properly. You do want to make sure, unless you have an aftermarket cable that specifically tells you not to oil the interior or anything like that, like Magnum shielding. I know they're the only ones I can think of offhand that tells you not to, but Magnum shielding specifically tells you not to oil anything, whether it's your clutch or your idle or throttle cables. But if it's a normal one or an aftermarket like the Drag Specialties ones that I have on here, I haven't seen any labels here that say not to. So just make sure you can get them in like a little syringe type of thing, like a needle or really anywhere else. But the Harley always sells them too. It's like a little, almost looks like a women's makeup tube, but filled with oil. Basically, you just uncap this and every little bit, every once in a while, just spray a few drops or squirt a few drops of oil in there just to make sure that everything stays lubricated up, because you do have a sleeve of metal with another sleeve of metal going in there. So yeah, thank you guys for watching very much. I appreciate it. Hopefully this helps you guys out. If you have any questions or concerns or whatever, of course, I love when you guys comment on the video. It helps me out. It helps the YouTube algorithm out as well. Instagram is the easiest place to have like a full conversation with me though. You can find my Instagram link, and as well as the links for really everything that's done to this bike, the playlist for my previous and current bike builds, as well as a discount code for Tucker Speed because they're the best. They got our back, so support them. But everything is in the description. As usual, I will see you guys on the next one. And until then, ride safe, have fun. Dad out.